Here's Tucker Carlson talking about how his viewership has gone up on the right-wing Fox News because he's been very vocal about speaking for white rights.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Last night we did something we don't do very often. We spent the entire first block of the show on a single topic. We told you about Black Lives Matter. We told you what Black Lives Matter believes. We told you what the group plans to do to our country as they amass unprecedented amounts of power. The segment went on for nearly 20 minutes, and by the standards of this...
What does that mean, that Black Lives Matter has amassed unprecedented amounts of power? How much power would that be? That they have amassed unprecedented amounts of power.
Street renaming rights, maybe. I don't know. Painting streets.
That's right. You have a mayor that's painted a street, and there is a finally at least talk of renaming military bases, not against our enemies who lost or something like that. But continue.
The segment went on for nearly 20 minutes, and by the standards of this business, it was probably way too long. There was a lot to say. But in the end, a lot of people saw it. The show turned out to be the most watched hour of primetime television in the country yesterday. It outrated everything else, cable and broadcast, news, entertainment, and sports. And we never talk about ratings, and we're definitely not telling you this to brag about it. There's already more than enough bragging in television, that's for sure. In any case, nothing in television lasts forever. Next week, we'll probably get beaten by a 3 a.m. re-air of Gilligan's Island or a 4-hour Love Boat retrospective. That'll probably happen. The point of telling you this is to remind you that you are not alone. You may feel like you are. Suddenly your opinions qualify as crimes. Dare to say what you think at work and you will be fired in the middle of a recession. Write what you think online and you will be silenced by the big tech companies. So you keep your views to yourself. You have no choice. A lot of Americans are doing that right now. They're staying quiet. And of course, that's the point of censorship, to keep people isolated and alone, to prevent a consensus from forming that challenges those in charge. If you're forced to shut up, they can do what they want to you and your country. That's why they do it. But last night's show suggested they have not yet succeeded, though they're trying. Millions and millions of Americans agree with you. You are not crazy. Your views are not evil. What is happening to this country right now is completely and totally wrong. And that will be obvious to everyone someday when our French Revolution has ended.
I wonder who the they he keeps referring to. Because the they in his calculation are not American citizens, right? Because he's talking to American citizens. You, everybody I'm talking to, are American citizens. They are trying to do something to our country. Not the our that involves the they. Our involves you. And it was about they, the Black Lives Matter supporters. I mean, first off, the numbers that he garnered, I have no doubt. There's just not that many primetime outlets for the type of white supremacy that he has. And so they congregate and watch his show. But he's going on. I mean, this is the game he's playing. He's trying to create this silent majority that exists. And frankly, it does not exist. It's quite evident it does not exist. You nearly need to look at the polling to see how people think that Donald Trump is handling these things, to know that the calculation that he's making, this is not 1968. Donald Trump is not Richard Nixon. Our America is not the same in a myriad of ways as it was in 1968.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, he's talking directly to white people. And this is the same message that Crowder was putting out yesterday, too. Like, the polling doesn't show how, because you have censored us. This is the entire, this is their banner right now. This is the way they get their people, motivated by, ramping up the grievance. And in this instance, it's white grievance.
Yeah, it's a lot of kind of Travis Bickle sort of vibe. I think that and I would caution, like, I don't think the new silent majority is necessarily super left, but it is not right. Like that's the reality, is that the center gravity is getting redefined in some very key ways. And I'd also say, I don't want to, Noam Chomsky had some really interesting, he's opposed to any form of censorship on public or private platforms, full stop, and has a very substantive view of free speech, which I definitely agree with. But one of the things that I thought was interesting historically was he's just like, look, I don't agree with any form of censorship in private. And he told a terrifying story, actually, of a book he published in the 70s. The owner, the publishing house was owned by a larger conglomerate. Somebody in the board of directors of the conglomerate saw an ad for the book, didn't like it, and demanded it be pulled. The publisher refused, and he went about basically pulping the entire company. It was an extraordinary story. So Chomsky, but he's like, look, the only reason this is in play right now is because it's happening to the right. Now, from his perspective, it shouldn't happen to anybody, which I agree. But he's just like, this has happened to the left for decades. And another reason the left shouldn't get so into this is because don't have any mistake about where this is ultimately going. Like, the fact that Tucker can say this with a straight face while his most famous viewer is the president of the United States reveals the whole game.
Yes. And, we were actually, Matt and Brenda and I were talking about this before the show today, that the structure of government and private censorship has not changed. The mechanisms have not changed. It's just that it used to be you would be censured and you would be excommunicated if you spoke out about the country club's policy of not admitting black people.
Right. That's right. Exactly. That's exactly the point.
If you, it's just, and I don't know. And I think that, like, look, I think we are living in an age of not excess of censorship. It's just that where the needle has pointed is different than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And 20 or 30 years ago, those who were subjected to this type of, censorship, if you want to call it that, or shaming or, shut down by the mechanisms in which people print, I think there's a lot less, obviously, than there was, because there's a bar to entry that is lowered. Now, you could argue that Facebook and Google are sort of like raising that bar in some fashion. I think there's some truth to that from where it was, let's say 5-10 years ago. But it really is just a function of, this gets back to that same notion of, like, white people are losing their privilege. I mean, this, broadly speaking, the same similar dynamic. White people are losing their privilege, and they perceive that as an attack on their rights. And in fact, I think, the reality is that there's going to be overcompensation in society in times like this, no doubt whatsoever. But let's be clear on where the real power continues to lie. And so
and from my perspective, I would just say, I think that and what I like so much about Chomsky's perspective, because it's my perspective, is that, don't allow very, very, very important arguments about open culture, speech, and the deeper history here and the real political implications of this stuff to get weaponized by grievance merchants. Like, there's a reason to support this stuff and hold pretty absolutist positions on this stuff that has a historical sweep and implicates other areas like corporate power, like foreign policy, on which there is no significant change of power. In fact, you could argue, I would actually argue, in some ways, sort of mainstream news attacking of those institutions is less than it was, say, in the 70s. I mean, you don't have Seymour Hersh working for the New York Times. And even there, I'm always reminded of Mark Ames having this incredible piece about how Seymour Hersh, after exposing My Lai, exposing the CIA, sets out to expose this secretive financial conglomerate in the 70s that has ties to the mafia, that is monopoly power across every kind of major sector in the United States. And the piece lands with a whimper, basically, because even unlike the CIA and the Pentagon, even with all their power and all of their sinister relationship to democracy, at the end of the day, they're still respecting FOIA requests. They're not using lawyers to shut them down.
Right.
Whereas this private company is saying, we will bankrupt the New York Times. We will destroy you. We will put private detectives on you. And that's actually much more the world we're in today. So it's important to just keep all these variables in mind and do not allow very serious conversations about censorship in the press to just get reduced to what right-wing whining. That's not where the action is.